Hi, hello. Welcome back. It is the Moon Griffon Show, hour number 3 of the Moon Griffon Show. Thank y'all for being part of it. 844-766-6607 is the number if you'd like to be part of the program. It is an honor to have back on the Moon Griffon Show. It is the Honorable Senator, United States Senator John Kennedy. Senator Kennedy, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Moon. Walking on sunshine, man.
Yeah.
I'm back in America, back in Louisiana, going back to D.C., I think Monday.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you got a few extra days. Nothing wrong with that. I'm kind of laughing. So my wife put a post on my Facebook, and I went and looked at it. It's you saying something about I woke up this morning and followed Jesus, but about 10 o'clock I'm still following Jesus, but I got to slap the hell out of somebody. I thought, oh, my God. You in Washington, D.C., and you definitely probably been sitting in a committee.
That's Washington, man. It's whenever in Washington, whenever I feel inadequate, which happens, I just stop and look around, man, and I feel better.
Tell people that all the time. Look around sometime, you might feel better. Let's talk a little bit about, got several things to bring up in a couple segments. Before we get to the big, beautiful bill, because I want to know where that stands in the Senate, how about Trump versus Harvard? Now, you know, we can read stuff, Senator Kennedy, but that doesn't mean we know what's going on, okay? So what's going on with Harvard and what is the president's really, really working hard to do some things there. So can you tell us a little bit more in detail what's going on?
Yes. Harvard does not practice viewpoint diversity, which is an integral part of academic freedom. Mm-hmm. Harvard practices what's called ideological capture, which means they just teach one point of view. Harvard teaches that the world is divided into the oppressed and the oppressors. And oppressors, like America, like Israel, are evil and they have to be punished. And the oppressed are all victims and they have to be helped. It's a form of neo-Marxism. That's why Harvard supports racial quotas. Mm-hmm. That's why Harvard supports diversity, equity, inclusion, and the right to hurt Jewish people. There's just one problem with this, among others. Was one main problem. This is illegal. Mm-hmm. It violates our civil rights laws. And under our civil rights laws, it renders Harvard ineligible for federal money. And so President Trump, that's why President Trump has gone Catwoman on Harvard. Mm-hmm. He said, look, you know, you can believe and behave how you want in America, including if you're a university, so long as it's not illegal. But if it's illegal, among other things, you're not entitled to federal money. And Harvard's position is we can do whatever we want, and we have a constitutional right to federal taxpayer dollars because we're indispensable. Well, they're not indispensable. There are plenty of fine universities in America that can do research, for example, without giving the money to Harvard. And the other point I'd make is what Harvard does, it takes these billions of dollars of federal taxpayer money, supposedly for research, and they skim a bunch off the top because money is fungible, and they spend it to operate the rest of their universities.
But
we're putting a stop to that, too.
That was the next question. How can Harvard, I mean, you could close Harvard today in the United States and still going to move forward. How can Harvard get so many billions, John? I mean, what gives them the right to get so much money from the federal government?
Well, they convince the bureaucracy, and in some instances the Congress, that they're indispensable, that we have to give them that money to do cutting-edge research. And that's not true. It's not true. And if they're using that money the way they appear to be using it to violate academic freedom, they're not eligible for the federal money. Look, Harvard is just an overpriced indoctrination mill. That doesn't mean there are not a lot of smart people there. They are. And they have the right to do that. But if they violate federal law while doing that, they're not eligible for federal money. And that's why Trump is on them like a cat on a fat rat. And I think Trump will ultimately win.
By the way, is this something that got to go to court, or can you guys in the House and Senate just make it happen?
Oh, we could make it happen. We can't pass it in the Senate because we would have to get 10 Democratic votes to do it, and the Democrats aren't going to vote to do it. So the president's done it through an executive order, basically saying, look, I'm the president. My job is to enforce the law. I'm enforcing the law. Harvard's, as long as they keep doing what they're doing, is ineligible for federal money. Yeah. But it's not going to hurt research. Yeah. There are plenty of places that can do research in America. We can do it at DARPA. We can do it at other universities that do practice viewpoint diversity. We can do it at the NIH. Harvard's not indispensable.
No, I don't think anybody's indispensable, and there's not any kind of entity that's indispensable. Let me jump gears with you, because what's going to happen? The federal courts and these local jurisdictions are making it hell on the president. Every time he does something, they're allowed to stop him. Why won't the Supreme Court stop what they're doing? It doesn't seem right that some federal judge in Okeechobee can make a ruling that affects the whole country on what the president of the United States is doing. Why is it at the Senate's responsibility? Is it the responsibility of the Supreme Court? Why haven't we stopped these courts from doing what they're doing? We didn't elect them to be the president.
Well, you're talking about universal injunctions.
Yes, sir.
And there's a case right now in front of the Supreme Court where the Supreme Court, if it wants to, and I hope it does, will put some restrictions on the issuance of a universal injunction. There's no for a universal injunction is when a federal judge, as you know, he doesn't just enter a judgment that affects the parties that are before him. They enter an injunction or a judgment that affects the whole country.
Of course.
And there's no basis in statute to do that. There's no basis in the Constitution. There's no basis in English common law, which most of our law is based on. The federal courts just made it up. And nobody paid much attention in the last century because they only used it 20 or 30 times.
Yeah.
And then in this century, they started using it a little bit against Obama and Bush and Biden, but it exploded under President Trump. Yeah. And it's clear that the federal judiciary is overstepping its bounds, but the Supreme Court is the only party practically that can rein them in.
Yeah.
We could pass a bill in Congress, but again,
but let me ask you a question.
10 Democratic votes.
Here's my next question. Last one on this. How come the Supreme Court hadn't even picked this up, or have they? I haven't seen them touch anything.
It's before them right now.
Okay.
It's before them right now, but I don't know. I can't tell from the oral argument what they're thinking.
Yeah, I've been disappointed in some of the Republicans. That's why I'm asking a question. It kind of worries me that I'm not trying to get in a rule in favor of Trump. I'm trying to get them a rule in favor of a president of the United States who was duly elected from doing their job because some court says no.
Well, it's just not workable. You can't, for example, a president, any president, has authority given to him or her under the Constitution to conduct foreign policy. If a president elected by the people, makes a decision on foreign policy, you can't have a federal judge in Bucksnort, Pennsylvania, deciding, well, I disagree with the president on foreign policy, so I'm going to shut him down. Yeah. That's not. That doesn't reflect the separation of powers. And again, it didn't happen much for the longest time, but it exploded under President Trump, and now it's brought the system to a grinding halt.
Yeah, that's a shame. Look, let me take a quick break, come back and wrap up, do a few more questions. I got a couple more questions for you. We'll start with the big, beautiful bill. And then I got one big one for you. I want you to be able to handle something for me, and something I'm against, but everybody seems to be for. and I want you to explain it to me. Anyway, all that and more. His name is United States Senator John Kennedy. We'll take a break. Be right back. Hi, hello. Welcome back. It is the Moon Griffon Show. Great to have you back with us. All right, we are joined by United States Senator right here from Louisiana, John Kennedy. Hey, Senator Kennedy, the big, beautiful bill has got to get through the Senate. What do you think it stands? What do you like? What do you don't like? I mean, do you think it passes, and ultimately does it pass?
Something will pass. I just don't know what it'll be.
Okay.
It's called a reconciliation bill. A reconciliation bill is just a budget bill, but it's a special kind of budget bill. Under the Budget Control Act, once a year, the party in power can pass a tax and spending bill without having to without being subject to the filibuster. So we don't need Democratic votes. When the Democrats were in power, that's how Biden passed the American Rescue Plan. That's how we passed the tax cuts back in 2017 under President Trump. The main purpose of the reconciliation bill, as it started out, was to renew the tax cuts from 2017. They're going to expire at the end of this year. If we don't renew them, it's going to be a $4.3 trillion tax increase on the American people, which will send our economy on a journey to the center of the earth. But we're also entitled, within certain limits, under the reconciliation bill, to cut spending. And President Trump and Elon Musk found a lot of waste, some of which under the rules we can't cut under reconciliation, but a lot of which we can, and that's what the fight is over right now.
Okay. So you do feel like something will pass. It's going to have to.
Yeah, I'm all for. Look, my friend Mike Johnson and Steve Scalise, they did a great job in the House. They did the best they could do. They cut $1.5 trillion of spending over 10 years, but we got to do more.
Yeah.
And I'm in the camp that wants to do more. But not all my colleagues agree with me. And I want to cut as much spending as we can until we run out of votes, which means we got to pass this bill. Yeah, otherwise, these tax cuts are going to kill us.
One of the last times I had you on, I still use this. You made a comment that as long as they're buying our bonds, buying our debt, we're okay. And I said, what happens if we don't? We in trouble. Still a concern that we still set up that way because, we got a lot of debt now. And it looks like it's – now, according to this, what we've been hearing, this is a $4 trillion add to the deficit. I had Mike Johnson on at the top of the last hour, and he says what is the CBO? They're not ranking this right. They're really to the left, swamp side. It has nothing to do with a $4 trillion increase in the federal deficit. Just your thoughts on the deficit, and if we're going to ever do anything about it, because if not, eventually this will cause the major problem that will bring us down.
Well, yeah, the deficit's a problem. You know, we probably ought to change the name of the Department of the Treasury to the Department of the Debt, because there's no treasury there. And yeah, we can still borrow money. People still buy our treasuries to pay down the debt. But the issue is also at what price. If people say, yeah, we'll buy your debt, but we're not going to buy it anymore at 4%, we want 6%. That turns our budget upside down. Mm-hmm. I mean, we got to reduce more spending. And Mike did the very best he could. You know, he's got such a slim margin. But we need to do better, and that's where we're going to fight. I don't think anybody's going to get stabbed, but we're going to have a fight over it in the Senate, and it'll probably end up being a job for alcohol, not coffee, and the president's going to have to intervene, but we'll get something done. I just can't tell what it is yet.
You think Mike was talking about doing it all before the 4th of July. You think that's a little bit too quick?
It depends on John Thune, our majority leader.
Okay.
If John has the power to say, look, I'm putting this bill on the floor, everybody can offer what amendments they want to offer, but by God, we're going to vote. That's why God made votes.
Yeah. Oh, and that's why y'all go to Washington, why you go to Baton Rouge. It's about the vote. That's what it becomes about.
But if he just says, let's discuss it until we reach a consensus,
not good.
It'd take years, man.
All right, John, I got it. This is a big tough one because I don't.
Sure.
I think carbon capture is the biggest joke I've ever seen. It's the biggest lie. It's worse than some of the COVID stuff. Produces nothing. Okay, but yet I was hoping the president. I saw in his beautiful bill he was going to get rid of credits for hydrogen, which may affect a few plants here. But the carbon capture, I had every expert. I went through every side. I went through meteorologists. I went through all these people. It produces absolutely nothing. It's also a drain on our debt, big time. All companies don't. Nobody needs this. This is all part of the Green New Deal hoax. Why? I'm just curious. And I tell people, Johnny, people believe this about you. Not only are you funny as hell, but you're smart. People believe you're a smart guy. I believe you're a damn smart guy. I don't know if that's a good word to say damn, but you're a smart guy. Why is somebody like you not fighting carbon capture when it does nothing, produces nothing? And if they did everything they said it would do, it wouldn't affect the planet one bit. Why? I just want to know from your lips why, because I think you're a smart guy, and I think this thing is as bogus and fake as anything I've ever seen.
Well, we're going to have a fight over it. The House bill that's before us now rolled back some of the credits. I don't think they rolled them back enough. I'm not saying that all aspects of these clean energy credits are bad, but it's hard. There aren't words in English for me to describe how much money President Biden and his people wasted on these things. And we can't afford it. They're just gifts. They're giveaways. And they're not going to lower world temperatures. No. They're not going to reduce the rise in world temperatures. And so what I want to do in the Senate is go through every one line by line. I'm not saying you cut every one, but we need to cut more, in my opinion, than the House did. But the problem with that, Moon, in the Senate, some of these companies took advantage of all these huge taxpayer dollar tax credits.
Freebies.
And they started freebies. And they started building plants in senator states and investing money and creating jobs. And all of a sudden now the Republican senators have fallen in love with them.
But John, I want you to. The reason why I bring this up.
That's not the question. The question is, do they do what they say they're going to do? And they don't.
Yeah. The only reason I'm asking that is they're doing a lot of that here. I've heard lawmakers talk about this, and then we got property rights we fighting, and all of a sudden these companies, and I wish you could go back and look at some of these testimonies of these billion-dollar corporations pounding these little people because they want a chance to vote to protect their property and eminent domain, and these big companies are pounding these people. And I thought, of all the people I know, and I do know you, I thought this would be something you would really fight. I was hoping the president would cut every one of them that he could. Now, I know some of them, and you probably tell me, Moon, some of this we can't stop. It was done in another administration. I get it. But when this all falls and our economy is based on carbon capture, which produces nothing, that's where the concern comes into me. And I just think this is such a lie. And I just wish somebody led the charge against it. And that's what I don't see. I think people just moving it on. And you just said it, though. Those companies are all invested in it.
I don't agree with that. I mean, the press doesn't cover it, but the credits, the renewable energy credits have been a source of a huge fight. There were a huge fight in the House. There's a fight going on right now in the Senate. I want to reduce them a lot more. I'm not saying eliminate every one, because to be fair, you got to go through each one and look at it.
Sure.
I had a hearing with Chris Wright, the Secretary of Energy, the other day about this very subject, and it was covered a little bit in the press, but it's not being covered much. But I would say it's part of the spending fight we're going to have in the Senate.
Yeah,
I'll give you an example. I had somebody, a wealthy person from another country, in my office a couple of weeks ago. He wants to build $1 billion manufacturing plant, solar panels, and he's going to get $850 million from the taxpayers to build it. So he's getting a $1 billion plant for $150 million to make solar panels.
Yeah.
And I said, and he wants me to try to save his tax credits. And I said, sure, I'll do that. Pigs might fly someday.
Yeah.
That's when I'll do it.
Yeah.
I mean, why do we want to, why give him $850 million and not take $850 million and divide it up through every small business in Louisiana?
Good point. Let me ask you two quick.
That's the issue.
Yeah, two quick questions. One's kind of funny, but if I told you, I've been doing this 32 years. If I told you that I got $100,000 for
32 years.
32 years. But listen, what if I told?
I've got genes that aren't that old, for God's sake.
Listen to this. If I told you that for 32 years I got $100,000 grant from the federal government to get my program going, every year they give it to me. When you hung up, you wouldn't hang up and go, damn, how did Moon do that? And that would be no different than these companies. They just doing it on a bigger scale, but that's $3.2 million invested over 32 years. John, I'd have a nice nest egg. It wouldn't be fair for me to do that, but it's not fair for them either.
That right. We're doing that right now with your competitors. We give money, taxpayer money, to a bunch of radio stations in Louisiana, the public radio stations, to compete with you. Why should we give it? That's why I'm against it. I'm trying to take it away. Why should we give it to them and not you?
Yeah. Last question.
Once government starts picking favorites, man, you end up with Marxism.
I know. But last question, and thank you for your time. Should states like Louisiana be concerned? And let me not use it like states in Louisiana, like Louisiana. The federal government eventually, with all its debts, going to start cutting to the states. Should states be gearing up to handle more of the burden or continue to wait on the federal government, who, by the way, is $37 trillion in debt, if not more? Should states expect some cuts? Because I think they should, but I'm just asking you from the perspective of, say, Louisiana.
Yeah, they better. That's why we have a rainy day fund in Louisiana. Look, this can't be sustained.
No.
We can't sustain it. And every time I turn around, I'm not, people, if people think there's free money, they want their share. I get that.
Oh, no.
But every time I turn around, somebody's coming to me and going, we need some free federal money. And I get that. And I want Louisiana to get its fair share. But at some point, we at the federal level and at the state level, we've got to learn the magical healing power of a no.
Yeah.
We can't afford it.
But, John, you were, and I know you need to go, but you were the state treasurer. You saw everything here. I don't have to tell you anything about Louisiana that you don't know. Okay, I don't have to tell you. But if we get a 20% cut, a 15% cut, a Medicaid cut, or whatever, okay, and I say Medicaid cut and waste and fraud and abuse, it doesn't matter. It would be a cut. Anything we cut, our state better be prepared for it because, we're so dependent on the federal government now. And I just think they ought to be prepared. And that's what I've been telling lawmakers. You better get ready because you can't sustain none of what's going on in the United States right now. You got the last word. Let you get out of here.
Every business in the private sector knows what the business cycle is, and every business knows how to modernize and downsize. And if you cut 10 or 20% from the Louisiana state budget, would it hurt? Of course it would hurt. Could it be done? And if we do it right, we'll come out better? Yes. Now, before your whack job, some of your whack job listeners go say Kennedy calls for cutting 20%.
No, that didn't happen.
I'm just saying this idea that it can't be done. The impossible is often the untried.
Yeah. Well, I don't think you said anything that anybody ought to nut up on. I think you being honest, and I've been honest for 32 years. You can't keep doing what you've been doing and getting different results. And that's all I'm saying. I think we need to get geared up in the state of Louisiana for, look, 37 trillion could be 40 trillion one day. And then pretty soon, me and you talked about it. They quit buying the bonds. You told me we're in trouble. But guess what? We might be getting there.
It's the law of holes, man. When you're in one, you stop digging. Except government, instead of stop digging, it goes looking for a bigger shovel.
Yeah, about to say they get big shovels. His name is John Kennedy. He's our United States Senator. Senator, thank you for your time. You stayed with me a while, and I'm very grateful.
Man, it was fun, man.
All right. 32 years, I ought to be getting a grant, don't you think?
Man, Moon, you're older than the Adirondack Mountain.
We'll talk to you later.
I bet your first pet was a dinosaur.
Close. All right, John, thanks.
Bye.